Okay, in this tutorial, we're going to have a little look at the suitability of using a Pearsons test in order to analyze a data set. And of course, hopefully you've watched the tutorial that lies before this, which is a worked example. So you have an understanding about what a Pearsons test involves and what the test is all about and why you would be using it. So the first thing about why it is a suitable test is it's because we are interested in whether correlation exists between two variables. And because in this case, if we have a little look at our data set that we were thinking about in the previous tutorial, we were looking at the relationship between the environmental quality and pedestrian. And because we suspect that one might be influencing the other, and we suspected in that case that the quality of an environment might be influencing the number of people present, that we've gone and wanted to test that relationship to determine a degree of statistical test. Furthermore, our scatter graph indicates, and here we have a scatter graph of these two variables, that there might actually be a negative relationship. Now, in this case, we can see that it doesn't look particularly convincing. A lot of the scatters are quite far away from the line of best fit, which suggests that best we're going to have a very weak relationship. However, it's encouraging from two factors, and these are quite important factors. It looks like we have a normal distribution of a data set and that there is a linear relationship because the line of best fit is a straight line relationship, and that there is a number of variables at regular intervals. Just to give you a better idea about what that means, this data set here, this is a scatter graph once again, but it has a non-linear relationship, as we can see from this line of best fit. What that means is that we have a number of very small values and we have a number of very high values. Equally, it's not evenly distributed. And if we look at the data set that created this graph, the scatter graph, we can see that there are a number of pairs of data that are all very small in their values, both on the X, which is this column of data here, and on the Y. Likewise, though, we have some very large values. So we have an abnormal or an unevenly distributed data set as well as it being nonlinear. Now, if this was our scatter graph that we got, then we would not be using a Pearson's test. But in this case, it's not, and therefore it is a suitable test from that perspective. Okay, let's just have a little look a bit deeper and think about other things we might discuss. So why do a Pearson's test? Well, the Pearson's test is a better form of statistical test than the Spearman test. And the reason for that is it doesn't rank the data. It keeps the extreme values within a data set, which is lost when the Spearman rank test is done because it does indeed rank. That means our data set keeps the anomalies, and therefore it makes it a better reflection of the true strength of that data set. So that's another positive reason for using the Pearson's test. It also will give us the statistical strength of that data and whether it is indeed positive or negative. Now, that is an incredibly important thing. The scatter graph that we see here just gives a suggestion of a possible relationship. The Pearson test will actually tell us the strength of that and whether it is positive or negative. And if we compare our result to a table of critical values, we'll actually be able to determine how statistically significant our result is. Okay. Another reason it's suitable is our data set in this example was, as we can see, real values or interval data. So we have calculated or counted the environmental quality and we counted the number of people, and we can therefore use the Pearson. If one of these had been derived data, for example, it had been a ratio, a percentage, or if it had been ordinal data, like we would be doing a Spearman, so if it would be ranked, then we wouldn't be able to. But because we have interval data, once again, it means it's an appropriate test. One of the weaknesses, and you've got to be careful as a geographer, is that these tests don't prove the link. They offer a degree of statistical certainty up to the 99% level, which is pretty good, but that doesn't actually prove because there's still a margin for error. Likewise, it doesn't explain a statistical link. We can see that point here. And that's quite important to bear in mind. We would need to, as geographers, go further and beyond to try to explain why a link might exist between our two variables. Okay. As I've already said, it doesn't work for nominal or ordinal data that's gathered in frequencies or categories, for example. And as I've also mentioned, that it has to have an even distribution and it must be linear. But of course, in this example, that is the case. Okay. Um, so for all of those reasons, this was a good one. And one final point, and you can make for a lot of statistical tests as a criticism of them, they do require a degree of mathematical competence in terms of both doing the maths to create the result, but then also to interpret the result. And therefore, using statistics has to be done with a degree of caution, because if you don't have that degree of strength and knowledge, then you've got to be careful about misinterpreting results or actually doing the maths wrong if you were indeed to go and complete the mathematical part of completing this test. One further point I should say is that this data set is large enough to conduct a Pearson's. We do have 13 pairs of data here. We would need a base minimum of 5, although generally speaking, 8 is the least you would be looking for. And actually, even 13 is probably not regarded as good enough, because you'd probably be looking for 50 to 100 pairs of data before you would be formulating any degree of certainty about whether a relationship existed between the two variables that you are interested in. So all of these are points that you'd be looking to use in relation to a question you've been asked about the Pearson test and whether it's suitable or not. You would want to, a key point to remember in an exam is relate your points to the actual data set you're being asked to discuss. And it's likely it could be a 5-mark question, so you'd be looking for 5 key points made.